Hello and welcome to this series of presentations from the Grade Circle project group. In this session, I'll be talking about how to assess the relevance component of Grade Circle. I'm Simon Lewin from the Norwegian Institute of Public Health and the South African Medical Research Council, and I'm presenting today on behalf of the Grade Circle project group. The learning objective for this session is to understand the role of the relevance component in a grade circle assessment, and to be able to apply this component to a finding from a qualitative evidence synthesis. The grade circle approach has been developed by the Grade Working Group to support the use of findings from qualitative evidence syntheses in decision making. Grade Circle includes 4 components for assessing how much confidence to place in qualitative evidence syntheses. The components are relevance, methodological limitations, coherence, and adequacy of data. This lecture focuses on the relevance component of Circle. In this presentation, I will explain what relevance is and how to assess it. So why do we need to assess the relevance of review findings within the Grade Circle approach? In many qualitative evidence syntheses, the body of data from the primary studies may not be completely relevant because of differences between these data and the context of the review question. By context, I mean factors like geographical setting or types of populations. I will come back to these factors later in the presentation. In some cases, the body of data from the included primary studies may not be completely relevant because these data only partially address the context specified by the review question. This occurs if the body of data from the included studies covers only a subgroup of the population or a subtype of the intervention. In other cases, relevant studies are missing entirely. It is important to note that the Grade Circle approach assesses the internal relevance of the evidence from included studies contributing to a review finding. In other words, we assess relevance in relation to the context of the review question, and not, for instance, a particular context in which the findings might be applied. So what do we mean by relevance in the context of Grade Circle? We have defined relevance as the extent to which the body of evidence from the primary studies supporting a review finding is applicable to the context specified in the review question. Review authors might be less confident that the finding reflects the phenomenon or topic of interest when the contexts of the primary studies underlying a review finding are substantively different from the context of the review question. It is useful to think about concerns about relevance as falling into 3 groups. Firstly, indirect relevance. This is when the included studies do not directly reflect the review question. Secondly, partial relevance. This occurs when the included studies only represent a subset or part of the review question. And thirdly, unclear relevance. This arises when the extent to which the included studies reflect the review question is unclear, for example because of poor reporting of context in the published papers or reports. Let's look at some of the examples of these different types of concerns regarding the relevance component. If we were conducting a review of women's experiences of a health issue, and one or more studies included in the review focused on health workers' perceptions of women's experiences, we would have concerns about indirect relevance, because in this case, health workers are giving their views of women's views. Concerns about partial relevance might arise if, in a review, most of the included studies were from Canada, while the review question was global in focus. If we are in the situation where the review focuses on primary care, but the included studies do not provide sufficient information to assess whether the data were collected in primary care settings, then we would have concerns about unclear relevance. Let's move on to look at how to assess the relevance component. To assess the relevance of the data, you need to identify similarities and differences between the context of the study supporting each review finding and the context specified in your review question. It's important to remember that you should assess relevance for each finding individually and not for the review as a whole. This is because you may have different concerns with regard to different findings, depending on which studies contribute data to those findings and the contexts of those studies. When assessing relevance, our aim is not to judge whether some absolute standard of relevance has been achieved, but rather to judge whether there are grounds for concern regarding relevance. In the next few slides, I will outline some of the contextual factors that you might consider when assessing relevance. This is not a comprehensive list, and a different group of factors will be important for each review question. For some review questions, time might be an important contextual factor. For example, were some of the studies conducted too long ago to be relevant to the review question? This may be important where health or social care policies or delivery arrangements for services have changed in important ways over time, or where, for example, drug regimens for managing a health issue have changed. For some review questions, setting and place may be important contextual factors. For example, how closely does the place of care, whether this is the home or a district hospital, or the setting, urban, rural, and so on, match that specified in the review question? You may have concerns if the match is not direct, or if it is unclear from a primary study what the setting and place for the study was. Other contextual factors that may be important to consider are the topic of interest and the population. When making your assessment of relevance, you should consider if there's anything about the topic of interest or the intervention that raises concerns. For example, is the intervention that participants in the study experienced, or the topic on which the study focuses, different in important ways from the one specified in the review question? You may also need to consider the populations in the included studies. For instance, do we only have information from the included studies about a subset of the population of interest and not the whole population? This situation may arise where primary studies focus on a particular age group, while your review question focuses on the whole population. Once you have considered the important contextual factors for your review question, you need to make a judgment about the seriousness of your concerns regarding relevance. You should also provide a justification for this judgment. In the Great Circle approach, you should begin your assessment with the assumption that there are no concerns regarding relevance for the body of data contributing to each finding. If you identify concerns, these should be categorized into one of the following 4 levels. Firstly, no or very minor concerns regarding relevance. Second, minor concerns regarding relevance. Third, moderate concerns. And finally, serious concerns regarding relevance. This categorization is a judgment, and it is helpful to discuss this judgment within the review team as you assess each review finding. Once you have settled on a judgment, you need to record your reasons for reaching this judgment. This forms your justification for your assessment. For example, You may note that you have moderate concerns, as the studies contributing to the finding were only partially relevant, because only a small range of geographic areas were represented, while the review question was global in scope. This brings us to the end of this lecture. I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of the rest of the Grade Circle project group, listed here, to the material included in this presentation. To learn more about Grade Circle and for further reading, you can visit our website, join the mailing list via the web page or email below, or join the Grade Circle project group via the web page. Please also follow us on Twitter. Thanks for listening.